Is the Bible the Word of God? Probably the best description of the Bible is the Word of God. Just as we use words to communicate with one another and as a means to express ourselves, so the Bible is a method of communication and an expression of God's will and character. Jesus himself referred to the Old Testament scriptures as the Word of God. He said, "Thus you nullify the Word of God for the sake of your tradition." Actually, we might want to think about those words in Matthew 15. Isn't that exactly what we find when people downgrade the authority of the Bible even today? Imagine Jesus saying this to you. How awful that would be. The way to avoid it is simply to become a Bible-believing Christian, but let's move on. The Gospel writer Luke also considered Jesus' teaching as being the Word of God. His teaching is the Word of God, which makes up the majority of the four Gospel accounts. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the Word of God. Again, Jesus uses the phrase, the Word of God, when referring to the message or expression of God's will and purpose, which, if believed, has the power to save. In the parable of the sower, Jesus said the seed is the Word of God. Those along the path are the ones who hear, and then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts, so that they may not believe and be saved. In all these examples, the Word of God is either referring to the Scriptures or to the teaching of Jesus Christ, which again is preserved for us in the New Testament Scriptures. The same phrase is used at least 10 times throughout the book of Acts, where the early church began to spread the gospel message. And it's most deliberately used again by Paul to describe the gospel message which had been delivered to the church in Thessalonica. He says, "And we also thank God continually, because when you received the Word of God, which you heard from us, you accepted it not as a human word, but as it actually is, the Word of God." That's in 1 Thessalonians. The Word of God, then, was something which was being passed on by Paul. It was taught by Jesus. It could be accepted or rejected, and those who believe it will be saved. Where can we find this Word of God? We can only find it recorded in the Bible. The Word of God, if it is the expression of God's will and purpose, ought also to be perfectly seen within the person of Jesus Christ, of course, who is the ultimate expression of God in the flesh. The Gospel writer John drives this point home in the opening sentences of his testimony of Jesus. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." If Jesus referred to the Old Testament teaching as the Word of God, the New Testament writers described the gospel message as the Word of God, and Jesus himself was described as the Word, God's ultimate self-expression, about whom the whole Bible testifies, then it seems only right to refer to the Bible as a whole as being the Word of God, his communication and expression of his will, character, and plan of salvation to humankind.